The wolf's teeth were inches from her throat when the bullet tore through the night air and sent the beast tumbling sideways into the New Mexico dust. Harrison Ingram lowered his rifle and urged his horse forward, his heart hammering against his ribs as he took in the scene before him. 3 more wolves circled the woman who had pressed herself against an outcropping of rock, her dress torn and bloodied, her dark hair wild around her pale face. She held a broken tree branch like a weapon, her chest heaving with exhaustion and terror. He fired again, and another wolf yelped and retreated into the darkness. The remaining 2 turned their attention to him, their eyes reflecting the moonlight like yellow coins. Harrison dismounted in one fluid motion, keeping his rifle trained on the predators. They were thin, desperate, driven down from the mountains by the drought that had plagued the territory for months. "Get behind me," he called to the woman. She did not hesitate, stumbling toward him on legs that barely supported her weight. He caught her with one arm as she nearly collapsed, still keeping his weapon aimed at the wolves. They circled once more, calculating, but the fight had gone out of them with their packmates down. Finally, they slunk away into the scrub brush, leaving only the sound of the woman's ragged breathing and the distant howl of coyotes. "You hurt bad?" Harrison asked, finally looking down at her. "I do not think so," she said, her voice carrying the soft lilt of an accent he could not quite place. "Scratches mostly. They chased me for so long." Her legs gave out completely then, and he caught her properly, feeling how light she was, how her whole body trembled. Up close, he could see she was young, maybe 23 or 24, with striking features and eyes that held a depth of pain beyond the night's terror. "My horse is not far. Can you ride?" "Yes, I think so." He helped her onto his mare, a sturdy bay named Copper, then swung up behind her. She sagged against him immediately, and he could feel the fever heat radiating from her skin despite the cool October night. "Where were you heading?" he asked as they started toward his ranch. "Anywhere. Away." Her voice was fading. "They took everything. The men who hired me. They said I would work in their house, but when we got to their camp, they laughed and said I would work on my back instead. I ran. I have been running since yesterday morning." Harrison's jaw tightened. He had heard such stories before, women lured west with promises of honest work only to find themselves trapped in situations far darker. "You are safe now," he said quietly. "My ranch is just over the next rise." She said nothing, but he felt her body relax slightly against his chest. By the time they reached the modest homestead he had built 5 years ago, she had lost consciousness entirely. The ranch consisted of a small house, a barn, a corral, and not much else. Harrison had built it all with his own hands after returning from the war, seeking solitude in the vast emptiness of the New Mexico territory. Las Cruces was a hard day's ride south, and he made the trip no more than once a month for supplies. He preferred it that way, alone with his cattle and his memories, and the silence that demanded nothing from him. But now that silence was broken by the presence of another human being, a woman who needed help whether he was prepared to give it or not. He carried her inside and laid her on his bed, the only bed in the single-room house. In the lamplight, he could see the full extent of her condition. Her dress was indeed torn, revealing angry scratches along her arms and one nasty gash on her calf. Her feet were bloody and swollen, wrapped in strips of cloth that had once been part of her petticoat. She had run a long way indeed. Harrison heated water and cleaned her wounds as gently as he could, his rough hands surprisingly careful. She stirred once or twice but did not wake. When he had done all he could, he covered her with his only blanket and sat back, studying her face in the lamplight. She was beautiful, he could not deny that. Even filthy and injured, There was something striking about her features, something that made him think of paintings he had seen in museums back east before the war, before everything had gone to hell. But beauty meant nothing out here. What mattered was strength, resilience, the ability to survive. He wondered if she had that. And he wondered what the hell he was going to do with her come morning. Harrison slept on the floor near the stove, his rifle within reach. Old habits died hard, even 13 years after Appomattox. He woke at dawn as always and found her awake, watching him with wary eyes the color of storm clouds. "How are you feeling?" he asked, sitting up. "Better. Thank you for helping me." She spoke carefully, as if testing each word. "I am Theresa Kowalski." Harrison Ingram. "Most folks call me Harry, but there are not many folks around here to call me anything." He stood and went to the stove, stirring up the coals. "You hungry?" "Very." He made coffee and fried some bacon and eggs, the smell filling the small house. She sat up slowly, wincing, but managed to move to the table under her own power. She ate like someone who had not seen food in days, which was probably true. "The men who took you," Harrison said after a while, "you know where their camp was? Somewhere east of here." "I ran west toward the mountains, then south when the wolves came. I do not know this country. I came from Chicago 2 weeks ago." She looked down at her plate. "I was so stupid. The advertisement promised a position as a governess for a ranching family, good wages, respectable work. When I arrived in Las Cruces, a man met me at the station and said his employer had sent him. I believed him." "Not stupid," Harrison said. "Trusting maybe, but not stupid. There are men out here who prey on that trust. The territory attracts a certain kind of scum." "You are not scum," she said, meeting his eyes directly. "You could have left me to the wolves, or worse." He felt uncomfortable under her gaze and turned to pour more coffee. "I am not much of anything, but I am not that. You can stay here until you heal up enough to travel. Then I will take you to Las Cruces. There is a woman there, Mrs. Henderson, who runs a boarding house. She might have worked for you or at least know of something. You live here alone, 5 years now. I run about 200 head of cattle on the range east of here. It is not much, but it suits me. It must be lonely." Harrison shrugged. "I prefer it." She studied him for a long moment, and he wondered what she saw. He was 34 years old but looked older, weathered by sun and wind and the weight of things he tried not to remember. His dark hair was too long, his beard unkempt. He stood just over 6 feet and was built lean and hard from physical labor. He had been told once that he had kind eyes, but that was a long time ago, and he suspected they were not so kind anymore. "How old are you?" he asked abruptly. 22. "Is that important? Just curious." He stood. "I have work to do. There is water in the pitcher if you want to wash up. You should rest today, let those wounds start to heal." "Harrison," she said as he headed for the door, "thank you, truly." He nodded and escaped into the clear morning air, feeling oddly rattled. It had been so long since he had been alone with a woman, since he had heard his name spoken in that particular gentle tone. He did not like how it made him feel, like something frozen inside him was beginning, against his will, to thaw. The next few days fell into an uneasy routine. Harrison worked the ranch from dawn until dusk, checking on the cattle, repairing fence line, doing the 100 small tasks that kept the operation running. Theresa stayed in the house, resting and recovering. He had given her one of his shirts to wear while her dress dried after she washed it, and something about seeing her in his clothes made his chest feel tight. She was not idle in her recovery. Despite his protests, she began tidying the house, which had accumulated the particular chaos of a bachelor existence. She washed dishes and swept floors and organized his meager supplies with an efficiency that spoke of hard work in her past. She also cooked, transforming his simple provisions into meals that actually had flavor. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" he asked one evening, surprised by the quality of the stew she had prepared. "My mother. She worked in the kitchen of a hotel in Chicago. I grew up there learning from her. She wanted better for me, which is why she saved money to send me west when I saw the advertisement." Theresa's face fell. "She died last year. Consumption." "I should have known the job was too good to be true, but I wanted so badly to believe I could make something of myself, make her proud." "She would be proud that you survived," Harrison said quietly, "that you fought back and ran instead of giving up. Did you fight in the war?" she asked, changing the subject. He tensed. "I did." "Which side?" "Union, New Mexico Territory sent volunteers. I was 19 and stupid, thought it would be an adventure." He stood abruptly, his appetite gone. "I will check on the horses." He felt her eyes on him as he left, but she did not follow or press for more. He was grateful for that at least. By the end of the week, Theresa was moving around easily, the scratches on her arms fading to thin red lines. The gash on her calf would scar, but it was healing cleanly. She had fashioned a new dress from an old curtain she found in a trunk, and while it was far from fashionable, it fit her well enough. "I should take you to Las Cruces soon," Harrison said one morning over breakfast. "You are healed enough to travel, and winter will be here before long. You need to get settled somewhere before the snow comes." "Of course," she said, but something in her voice sounded flat, disappointed even. "Unless," he found himself saying, "you want to stay on a bit longer. I could use help with some things around here. I am not much of a housekeeper, as you have seen. I could pay you a small wage, and when spring comes, you would have enough saved to make a better start." Her face lit up in a way that made his heart skip. "Do you mean it? I would not be a burden." "You have been cooking and cleaning for days without me asking. That is hardly a burden. And there is other work too. I need to put up preserves before the frost, and I have been putting off mending my winter clothes because I hate sewing. If you are willing to work, I am willing to pay." "Yes," she said immediately. "Yes, I would like that very much." And so it was settled. Harrison told himself it was purely practical, that he was simply hiring help, but he knew that was not entirely true. The house felt different with her in it, warmer somehow, despite the approaching winter. He found himself looking forward to meals, to the sound of her humming as she worked, to the way she asked him questions about the ranch and actually seemed interested in his answers. October gave way to November, and the first real cold came sweeping down from the mountains. Harrison spent long days gathering his cattle closer to the ranch, preparing for winter. Theresa worked alongside him when she could, learning to ride Copper well enough to help drive the stragglers. She was not a natural horsewoman, but she was determined, and determination counted for a lot in this country. One evening, they were working together to move a small group of cattle into a protected canyon when a steer broke away and headed for rougher ground. Without thinking, Theresa spurred Copper forward to cut it off. The mare stumbled on loose rock and Theresa went flying. Harrison's heart stopped as he watched her hit the ground and roll. He was off his horse before he knew he had moved, running to where she lay still in the dust. "Theresa! Theresa, answer me," she groaned and opened her eyes. "I am alive, just had the wind knocked out." He helped her sit up, his hands shaking as he checked her for injuries. "You could have broken your neck, you foolish woman. It is just a damn cow." "You needed help," she said, still breathless. "I was only trying to help. I do not need help so badly that you should risk yourself like that." He was angry now, though he could not have said exactly why. "You could have been killed, but I was not." She met his eyes, her own flashing with irritation. "I am not made of glass, Harrison. I am not some delicate Eastern flower. I have survived things you know nothing about." "I pulled you out from under a wolf pack," he shot back. I think I have some idea of what you have survived. And I survived 3 years working in a factory before that, with men who thought they could put their hands anywhere they pleased. I survived watching my mother waste away because we could not afford a decent doctor. I survived being sold to men who wanted to use me like property. I am still here, still fighting, and I will not be treated like I am fragile. She tried to stand, wobbled, and he caught her, holding her steady. They were very close suddenly, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her gray eyes, close enough to feel her breath on his face. I know you are not fragile, he said quietly. That is not why I am angry. I am angry because the thought of you being hurt made me feel things I have not felt in a very long time, and I do not know what to do with that. Her expression softened. What kind of things? He should have pulled away then, should have made some joke and put distance between them, but he could not seem to move. Like maybe I am not as dead inside as I thought I was. Harrison, she breathed. He kissed her then, or maybe she kissed him. He was never quite sure afterward. All he knew was that suddenly her lips were on his, soft and warm and tasting faintly of the coffee they had shared that morning. The kiss was gentle at first, almost questioning, but when she made a small sound in the back of her throat and pressed closer, something inside him broke wide open. His arms came around her, crushing her against his chest, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and hungry. It had been so long, so damn long since he had held anyone, since he had allowed himself to feel anything beyond the numbness he had cultivated so carefully. She felt alive in his arms, real in a way nothing had felt real for years. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "This is a bad idea," he said. "Probably," she agreed, but she was smiling. "I am not good at this, at letting people close. The war, it did things to me, broke something that never healed right. I have nightmares. I have days where I cannot stand to be around anyone. I am not easy to be with." "Nothing about me is easy either," Theresa said. "We can be difficult together." He laughed, surprising himself. "When did you get so brave?" "I think I was always brave. I just did not know it yet. You helped me see that." He kissed her again, softer this time, savoring it. Around them, the cattle lowed and the wind whispered through the canyon, and Harrison thought that maybe, just maybe, he could learn to be happy again. Winter settled over the New Mexico territory like a cold blanket, bringing snow and wind and long dark nights. Harrison and Theresa moved through the days like dancers learning a new dance, circling each other, growing closer in increments. They had not shared a bed, not properly. Harrison still slept on the floor, though he had moved his bedroll closer to the stove, claiming he needed the warmth. But they kissed often now, stolen moments when he came in from the cold or when they worked together in the small space of the house. Each kiss was a revelation, a reminder that he was still capable of tenderness. He learned things about her during those long winter nights. She told him about growing up poor in Chicago, about working in the factory from the age of 12, about the dreams she had harbored of something better. She spoke of her mother with love and grief intertwined, and he understood that particular pain. He had lost his own parents to cholera when he was 17, which was part of why he had joined the army, looking for a family to replace the one he had lost. In turn, he told her things he had never spoken aloud. About the war, about the battles that still haunted his dreams, about the friends he had watched die and the things he had done that he could never take back. She listened without judgment, her hand in his, and somehow that made it bearable. "You ever regret coming here?" she asked one night as they sat by the stove, drinking coffee and watching the snow fall outside. "Building this place so far from everything." "Sometimes," he admitted. "It is a hard life, lonely, but after the war I could not bear to be around people." Everyone wanted to talk about glory and honor, and all I could think about was the smell of blood and burning flesh. Out here, nobody asks those questions. The land does not care what you have done, only what you can survive. You survived, she said softly. That counts for something. So did you. We are a pair, are we not? Two survivors hiding out here at the edge of the world. She smiled, but there was sadness in it. Do you think we will ever stop running? I do not know, but maybe we do not have to run alone anymore. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat like that for a long time, comfortable in the silence. December brought a break in the weather, a string of clear, cold days that made travel possible. Harrison needed to go to Las Cruces for supplies before the next storm hit, and Theresa insisted on coming with him. I need fabric, she said firmly, and other things, female things. I cannot keep making everything out of old curtains and flour sacks. He felt his face heat. Right, of course. They set out early one morning, the wagon loaded with hides Harrison planned to trade. The journey to Las Cruces took most of the day, the road rough and rutted with ice. Theresa sat beside him on the bench, wrapped in every blanket they owned, her breath forming white clouds in the frigid air. The town was not much to look at, a collection of adobe buildings clustered around a dusty plaza. But after months of isolation, it felt almost cosmopolitan. They drew a few stairs as they drove in, a lone rancher and a young woman, clearly together, but just as clearly not married. Harrison felt Theresa tense beside him. Let them stare, he said quietly. Their opinions do not matter, but they do, she said. Out here, reputation is everything. If people think I am your woman but we are not married, that makes me something else in their eyes, something less. He knew she was right, but the thought of marriage terrified him more than any wolf pack or cattle stampede. Marriage meant permanence, commitment, the kind of vulnerability he had sworn off years ago. But looking at her pinched face, seeing the way she tried to hold her head high despite the whispers, something in him shifted. Then we will get married, he said. She stared at him. What? You heard me. If we need to be married to keep the gossips at bay, then we will get married. That is possibly the least romantic proposal I have ever heard, she said, but there was a tremor in her voice. I never claimed to be romantic. He stopped the wagon and turned to face her fully. But I mean it. I want you to stay, not as hired help, not as some temporary arrangement. I want you to stay as my wife if you will have me. I know I am not much of a catch. I am too old, too broken, too damn stubborn, but I will do my best to make you happy. You are 34, not ancient, she said. And I am just as stubborn as you are. We have already established that. Is that a yes? She studied his face for a long moment, and he tried not to squirm under her scrutiny. Finally, she nodded. Yes, but not because of what anyone else thinks, because I love you, you impossible man. I think I have loved you since you carried me into your house and cleaned my wounds with your rough, careful hands. I love you, and I want to spend my life with you, wherever that life leads. Harrison felt his throat tighten with emotion. I love you too. I did not think I could, not anymore, but I do. You brought something back to life in me that I thought was dead forever. He kissed her there in the middle of the street, not caring who saw, and she kissed him back with all the fierce joy she contained. When they broke apart, she was crying and laughing at the same time. We should find a priest, she said. Right now. Why wait? You just proposed to me in a wagon in the middle of winter. We might as well be married the same day. He grinned, feeling lighter than he had in years. All right then. Let us go find a priest. They found Father Miguel at the small adobe church on the edge of town. He was an older man with kind eyes and a gentle manner that reminded Harrison of the chaplain who had served with his regiment during the war. When they explained their situation, he smiled. I would be honored to marry you, he said. But I must ask, are you both coming to this freely? Miss Kowalski, you have not been coerced. No, Father, Theresa said firmly. I love him and I want to be his wife. And you, my son. You understand the sacred nature of this commitment. I do, Harrison said. I have thought about little else for weeks now. I know it seems sudden, but when you live the kind of life we do, you learn not to wait for perfect timing. You take happiness when you find it. Wise words. The priest gestured toward the altar. Come then. We will need witnesses. Let me see if I can find someone. He returned shortly with two elderly women who turned out to be delighted at the prospect of witnessing a wedding. They fussed over Theresa, straightening her dress and tucking flowers from the altar into her hair. Harrison stood awkwardly to the side, feeling suddenly nervous. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. Father Miguel spoke about love and commitment in both English and Spanish, his words echoing in the quiet church. When it came time for the vows, Harrison's voice was steady, surprising himself. I, Harrison Ingram, take you, Theresa Kowalski, to be my wife. I promise to protect you, to provide for you, and to love you for all the days of my life. In times of plenty and in times of hardship, in sickness and in health, until death parts us. Theresa's voice trembled slightly as she repeated her own vows, but her eyes never left his face. I, Theresa Kowalski, take you, Harrison Ingram, to be my husband. I promise to stand beside you, to support you, and to love you with all that I am. In times of peace and in times of struggle, in joy and in sorrow, until death parts us. They had no rings, so Father Miguel blessed their joined hands instead. By the power vested in me by the Holy Church, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Harrison had kissed Theresa many times by now, but this kiss felt different, weighted with promise and possibility. When they broke apart, the two old women were weeping with joy, and even Father Miguel looked misty-eyed. Go with God, he said, pressing a small wooden cross into Theresa's hands, and be happy together. They spent the night at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, the same place Harrison had planned to bring Theresa months ago. The widow was a practical woman who did not ask too many questions when they signed the register as Mr. and Mrs. Ingram. She showed them to a small but clean room and left them alone. Are you nervous? Harrison asked, suddenly aware that they were truly alone together for the first time as husband and wife. A little, Theresa admitted. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. I have never been with a man before, not like this. We do not have to do anything tonight, he said quickly. I did not marry you for that. I can sleep on the floor if you prefer. She looked up at him, and there was no fear in her eyes, only trust. I do not want you on the floor, I want you with me. I want to be your wife in every way. He crossed to her slowly, giving her time to change her mind. When he cupped her face in his hands, she leaned into the touch. Tell me if I do anything that frightens you. Tell me if you want me to stop. I will, but I do not think I will want you to stop. He kissed her then, long and slow, until he felt her body relax against his. They undressed each other carefully, learning the landscape of skin and scars, the particular topography of their bodies. Harrison was gentle, more gentle than he had known he could be, mindful of her inexperience. When they finally came together, it was with tenderness and care, and afterward she cried against his chest. Did I hurt you? He asked, alarmed. No, she said, laughing through her tears. I am just happy, so very happy. I did not think I could ever feel this safe, this loved. Thank you for that. He held her close, stroking her hair, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. He had spent so many years convinced he was better off alone, but now he could not imagine going back to that empty existence. She had become essential to him, as necessary as air or water. I love you, he whispered into her hair. I love you too, she whispered back. They returned to the ranch the next day, loaded down with supplies and filled with a new sense of purpose. The house felt different now, no longer just a shelter but a home. Theresa threw herself into making it more livable, using the fabric she had bought to make curtains and cushions, small touches that softened the rough edges. Winter deepened, bringing blizzards that kept them housebound for days at a time. Harrison had worried that the isolation might wear on them, but instead, it drew them closer. They played cards by lamplight, read to each other from the handful of books he owned, and made love with increasing confidence and joy. They also talked, long, rambling conversations about everything and nothing. Theresa told him about the books she had loved as a child, the ones she had borrowed from the library and read by candlelight after her mother fell asleep. He told her about the horses he had known, each one with its own personality, and about the dream he had of expanding the ranch someday, maybe breeding horses alongside the cattle. "We could do that," she said thoughtfully. "With two of us working, we could manage more, and I am a quick learner." "You are," he agreed, pulling her close. "You are also stubborn and brave and far too good for the likes of me." "Nonsense. We are exactly what each other needs." As winter wore on, they fell into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Harrison handled the heavy outdoor work, checking on the cattle, breaking ice from the water troughs, hauling hay. Theresa managed the house, cooked, mended, and began experimenting with making soap and candles to supplement their supplies. They worked together when they could, finding comfort in shared labor. One particularly cold morning in late January, Harrison was outside feeding the horses when he heard Theresa scream. He dropped everything and ran, his heart in his throat, bursting through the door with his rifle ready. She was standing by the window, pale and shaking, pointing outside. "There is someone out there, a man on foot stumbling. I think he might be hurt." Harrison looked where she indicated and saw a figure staggering through the snow. "Stay inside," he ordered, grabbing his coat. The man collapsed just as Harrison reached him. He was young, maybe 20, dressed in clothes too thin for the weather. His lips were blue with cold and he was barely conscious. Harrison hoisted him over his shoulders and carried him inside. "Get blankets," he told Theresa, "and heat water. He is half frozen." They worked together to warm the stranger, stripping off his wet clothes and wrapping him in blankets, spooning warm broth into his mouth. Gradually, color returned to his face and his eyes fluttered open. "Where am I?" he mumbled. "Ingram Ranch." "You were about dead when we found you. What were you doing out in this weather on foot?" Harrison asked. "Horse went lame, had to shoot it. Tried to make it to Las Cruces, got turned around in the snow." The young man's teeth were still chattering. "Name is Thomas Kent. I am a deputy marshal out of Santa Fe." "A lawman." Harrison felt Theresa tense beside him. "Yeah, been tracking a group of men who have been preying on women coming out from the east. Promised them jobs, then sold them to brothels or worse. We got a tip they were working out of Las Cruces." Theresa made a small sound and Thomas looked at her with sudden recognition. "I know you. You were one of the women reported missing. Miss Kowalski, right? From Chicago." "Mrs. Ingram now," Harrison said firmly. "And yes, she was one of their victims. She escaped and made it here." "Can you identify them? The men who took you?" Theresa nodded slowly. "I think so. There were 3 of them. The one who met me at the station was called Frank, I think. He had a scar here." She touched her cheek. "The other 2 I only saw briefly, but I would know them if I saw them again." Thomas sat up straighter despite his weakness. "Would you be willing to testify? If we can catch them, I mean. We need someone who can put names and faces to the crimes." "I do not want her anywhere near those men," Harrison said flatly. "I will do it," Theresa said quietly. "If it will stop them from hurting other women, I will do it." "Theresa, no, Harrison. You said I was brave, remember? Let me be brave. Let me help stop them." He wanted to argue, wanted to forbid it, but he saw the determination in her eyes and knew it would be useless. She had made up her mind. All he could do was support her. Thomas stayed with them for 3 days, recovering his strength. On the 4th day, the weather cleared enough for travel, and Harrison agreed to take them both to Las Cruces. He did not like it, but he understood necessity when he saw it. The trip was tense, Harrison constantly scanning their surroundings for threats. But they made it to town without incident and went straight to the small office that served as the marshal's post. The marshal himself was a grizzled man named Walter Hughes, who listened carefully as Theresa described the men who had taken her. His face grew dark with anger. "I know who you are talking about," he said grimly. "Frank Coates and his brothers, Jesse and Robert. We have been trying to pin something on them for months, but we had no witnesses willing to come forward. Most of the women they take end up too scared or too ruined to testify." "I am not scared," Theresa said, though Harrison could see her hands trembling. He took one of them in his, squeezing gently. "Good. We will set up a trap. If you can identify them positively, we can arrest them and hold them for trial. But I will not lie to you, Mrs. Ingram. These are dangerous men. They will not go quietly." "I will be there," Harrison said. "If she is in danger, I will be there to protect her." The plan was simple. Theresa would walk through town as if shopping, giving the Coates brothers a chance to see her. Thomas and Marshal Hughes would be positioned nearby, ready to move in if the brothers tried anything. Harrison would stay close to Theresa, armed and alert. It felt wrong, using his wife as bait, but Theresa insisted. "They stole weeks of my life," she said fiercely. "They made me feel like nothing, like meat to be sold. I want to see them pay for that. Not just for me, but for all the women who could not get away." So the next morning they put the plan into action. Theresa walked slowly down the main street, stopping to look in shop windows, acting as normal as possible. Harrison trailed 10 paces behind, his hand never far from his gun. They had been at it for perhaps 20 minutes when Harrison saw 3 men emerge from a saloon across the street. Even at a distance, he could see Theresa recognize them, could see the way her body went rigid with fear. But she did not run. She stood her ground, and Harrison had never been more proud of her. The man with the scar, Frank Coates, saw her and went pale. He said something to his brothers, and all 3 started moving toward her. Harrison's hand closed on his gun. "Well, well," Frank said, his voice carrying in the cold air. "The little bird who flew away. We have been looking for you, sweetheart. You owe us money for the trouble you caused." "I owe you nothing," Theresa said, her voice steady. "You are liars and slavers, and you are going to pay for what you have done." "Big words for a little whore," Jesse Coates said, reaching for her. That was as far as he got. Marshal Hughes and Thomas stepped out from their positions, guns drawn. "Frank, Jesse, Robert Coates, you are all under arrest for kidnapping and human trafficking." What happened next was chaos. Robert went for his gun, and Marshal Hughes shot him in the shoulder. Frank tried to run, but Thomas brought him down with a tackle. Jesse, seeing his brothers fall, threw up his hands in surrender. "Get her out of here," Marshal Hughes shouted at Harrison. Harrison did not need to be told twice. He grabbed Theresa and pulled her into the nearest shop, shielding her with his body as the scuffle outside continued. She was shaking now, the fear she had been holding at bay finally crashing over her. "You are safe," he murmured into her hair. "You are safe, and they cannot hurt you anymore. You did it. You were so brave." "I was terrified," she admitted, her voice muffled against his chest. "Bravery is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite fear. And you did that today. I am so proud of you." They stayed in town for the next week while the legal proceedings began. Theresa gave her testimony formally, describing in detail what had happened to her. Other women came forward once word spread, women who had been too afraid before but found courage in Theresa's example. The case against the Coates brothers grew stronger with each testimony. "They will hang for this," Marshal Hughes told them before they left for the ranch. "Maybe not all three, but Frank for certain. You did a good thing, Mrs. Ingram. You saved lives today." On the journey home, Theresa was quiet, processing everything that had happened. Harrison gave her space, knowing she needed to work through her emotions in her own time. That night, back in their own bed, she finally spoke. "I feel lighter," she said. "Like I was carrying something heavy and now it is gone. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense. You took back your power. You turned them from monsters into just men who will face justice. I could not have done it without you. You have been my strength through all of this." "No," he said, kissing her forehead. "You have always been strong. I just stood beside you while you proved it." Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, it felt like a new beginning. The snow melted, revealing green grass and wildflowers. The cattle grew fat on new growth, and the ranch thrived under the combined efforts of Harrison and Theresa. In April, Theresa realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but when she finally told Harrison, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "We are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" she asked, though she could see the answer on his face. "I am happier than I ever thought possible. You have given me everything, Theresa. A home, a purpose, love, and now a family. I do not know what I did to deserve you, but I thank God for you every day." She was crying now, happy tears. "I love you so much. You saved my life that night in more ways than one. You gave me a reason to keep fighting, to keep believing in good things." "We saved each other," he said, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "And now we get to save this little one, give them the kind of life we both wish we had growing up." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Theresa bloomed with health, her body taking to motherhood naturally. Harrison became almost comically protective, hovering whenever she did any kind of work, insisting she rest more than she felt necessary. "I am not made of porcelain," she reminded him regularly. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I will be fine." "I know. But let me worry anyway. It makes me feel useful." They spent the long summer months preparing. Harrison built a cradle from pine wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. Theresa sewed tiny clothes and blankets, marveling at how small everything was. They talked endlessly about names, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, about the future they were building together. In late November, during the first snowfall of the season, Theresa went into labor. Harrison had arranged for a midwife from Las Cruces to come stay with them as the due date approached, an older Mexican woman named Senora Martinez, who had delivered hundreds of babies. The labor was long and difficult. Harrison paced outside for hours, listening to Theresa's cries with growing panic. When Senora Martinez finally emerged and told him he had a son, he nearly collapsed with relief. "Can I see her? Is she all right? She is tired but well. Go meet your son." Harrison entered the room hesitantly, overwhelmed by what he saw. Theresa was propped up in bed, pale and exhausted, but smiling more radiantly than he had ever seen. In her arms was a tiny bundle, red-faced and squalling. "Come meet Henry," she said softly. "Henry." His voice cracked with emotion. "After you. Henry Joseph Ingram." Harrison sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at his son. He had seen birth before during the war, babies born in camps to desperate mothers, but this was different. This was his child, his blood, the future he had never dared dream of. "Hello, Henry," he whispered, touching one impossibly small hand. The baby's fingers closed around his calloused finger, and Harrison felt his heart break open in the best possible way. "I am your father, and I promise I will do everything in my power to keep you safe and happy." "He is perfect," Theresa said, "just like you." "I am not perfect," Harrison said, unable to look away from his son. "But I will try to be worthy of you both. That is my promise." The first few months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Henry was a good baby overall, but he had his fussy moments, particularly at night. Harrison and Theresa took turns walking the floor with him, singing lullabies and telling stories. One night, Harrison was up with Henry, rocking him gently by the stove when Theresa woke and found them there. She stood in the doorway, watching her husband with their son, and felt such a surge of love it almost hurt. "You are a natural at this," she said softly. Harrison looked up, smiling. "I am just following his lead. He lets me know what he needs, and I do my best to provide it. Simple, really." "Not so simple. You are a good father, Harrison, better than you give yourself credit for." "I am trying. That is all I can do." He looked down at Henry, whose eyes were finally starting to close. "I never thought I would have this. A family, peace, a reason to wake up in the morning beyond pure survival. You gave me all of that." "We gave it to each other," she corrected, coming to sit beside him. "I was lost before I found you, literally and figuratively. You showed me what it means to be loved properly, to be valued for who I am rather than what I can provide. That is a gift beyond measure." They sat together in the quiet house, their son sleeping between them, and felt the rightness of it settle into their bones. This was what they had been fighting for, this moment of perfect, ordinary peace. The years flowed by like water, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Henry grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's gray eyes. He followed Harrison everywhere, learning to ride and rope and care for the cattle. He was gentle with animals and quick to laugh, a happy child who knew he was loved. When Henry was 3, Theresa became pregnant again. This time, the baby was a girl, whom they named Lucy Margaret. She was tiny and fierce from the start, with a temper that kept them all on their toes. Harrison adored her completely, his little princess, and she had him wrapped around her finger from day one. The ranch prospered as the family grew. Harrison had made good on his dream of breeding horses, and the Ingram ranch became known for producing quality mounts. Theresa managed the books and the household with equal efficiency, proving to have a sharp mind for business. Together, they built something solid and lasting. One evening, when Henry was 7 and Lucy was 4, the family sat together after dinner. The children were playing with wooden toys Harrison had carved, and Theresa was mending clothes by lamplight. Harrison watched them all, feeling a contentment so profound it was almost painful. "What are you thinking?" Theresa asked, noticing his gaze. "That I am the luckiest man alive. That I almost threw all of this away by being too afraid to feel anything. But you did not throw it away. You chose to take a chance to let me in. That took courage. You made it easy. From that first night, when you looked at me with those eyes and I felt something crack open inside me, I think I knew you would change everything." He reached across the space between them and took her hand. "I love you more now than I did when we married, and I loved you desperately even then." "I love you too," she said, squeezing his hand. "Always and forever exactly as you are." Henry looked up from his toys. "Papa, will you tell us the story about how you and Mama met?" Lucy clapped her hands. "Yes, the wolf story." Harrison glanced at Theresa, who smiled. They had sanitized the tale for the children, turning it into an adventure story rather than the desperate rescue it had been. "All right," he said, setting aside his coffee. "Come here and I will tell you." The children scrambled into his lap and he began the familiar story. It was a cold night in October, and I was riding home across the range when I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. Wolves, howling in the darkness. As he spoke, embellishing certain parts and glossing over others, he met Theresa's eyes over the children's heads. In her gaze, he saw the truth of that night, the fear and pain and desperate hope. But he also saw everything that had come after, all the love and life they had built together. When the story ended with their wedding, Lucy sighed happily. "That is so romantic." "It is," Theresa agreed, coming to sit beside them. "Your father saved me in every way a person can be saved. And you saved me right back," Harrison said softly. More years passed. Henry grew tall and serious, taking on more responsibility around the ranch. Lucy remained a spitfire, equally comfortable in a dress or riding pants, with a gift for gentling even the wildest horses. They were good kids, growing into good people, and Harrison and Theresa were proud of them every single day. When Harrison turned 50, he woke to find Theresa already up, making his favorite breakfast. The children were older now, Henry 17 and Lucy 14, both still asleep in the loft they shared. "Happy birthday, old man," Theresa said, kissing him. "Old man indeed. How did this happen?" "I swear it was just yesterday we were newlyweds." "Time moves faster when you are happy," she said wisely, "and we have been very happy." "That we have." He pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "No regrets, not a single one. You, only that I did not find you sooner." They stood like that for a long moment, comfortable in each other's arms the way only long married couples can be. Outside, the sun was rising over the New Mexico landscape, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The ranch was quiet except for the lowing of cattle and the whinny of horses, the sounds of the life they had built together. Later that day, the whole family rode out to check on the eastern pastures. It had become a tradition, these family rides, time spent together away from the demands of the ranch. They stopped to rest by a small creek, and the children wandered off to explore, leaving Harrison and Theresa alone. "You remember the first time I brought you out here?" Harrison asked. "You had just learned to ride, and you were so determined not to show that you were terrified," Theresa laughed. "I was absolutely terrified, but I was more terrified of you thinking I was weak." "I never thought you were weak. Brave, stubborn, fierce, yes, but never weak." "I learned that bravery from you. You showed me what it means to face your fears instead of running from them." "We taught each other that," Harrison said. "I had been running from life for so long when you came. You forced me to stop running, to stand still and feel things again. It was painful at first, but God, it was worth it." She leaned against him and they watched their children playing by the water, so carefree and happy. "We did good," she said softly, "with all of it. The ranch, the family, us, we did really good." "We did," he agreed, "and we are not done yet. There are still years ahead of us, adventures to have, grandchildren to spoil someday." "Grandchildren," Theresa said with a laugh. "I can hardly imagine. But yes, I hope so. I hope we get to see our children build families of their own, see our legacy continue. Whatever the future holds, as long as I face it with you, I am not afraid." She turned to look up at him, and he was struck again by how beautiful she was, even after nearly 16 years of marriage. There was gray in her hair now and lines around her eyes, but to him, she was just as lovely as the day he had pulled her from under those wolves. "I love you, Harrison Ingram," she said. "Thank you for saving me." "Thank you for saving me right back," he replied, and kissed her as the sun climbed higher in the endless New Mexico sky. The years continued their steady march. Henry married at 20, a sweet girl from Las Cruces named Emma, and they built a house on the eastern edge of the property. Lucy was courted by several young men but remained fiercely independent, declaring she was in no hurry to marry, much to Harrison's secret relief. When Harrison was 54, he became a grandfather for the first time. Henry and Emma had a son whom they named Harrison Theodore, called Theo to avoid confusion. Holding his grandson for the first time, Harrison felt the circle of life complete itself in a way that was almost spiritual. "He has your nose," Theresa said, peering at the baby with delight. "Poor kid," Harrison joked, but he was crying, overwhelmed by emotion. "You are going to spoil him rotten," Emma predicted with a smile. "That is a grandfather's prerogative," Theresa said firmly. "We did our time being the strict ones. Now we get to be the fun ones." They were as good as their word. Theo became the light of their lives, spending as much time at their house as his parents. Harrison taught him to ride as soon as he could walk, gentle lessons on the oldest, calmest mare on the ranch. Theresa baked cookies and told stories, spoiling him shamelessly. Lucy eventually married when she was 24, to a horse trader from Santa Fe who appreciated her independence and skill with animals. They had twin girls, Alice and Beatrice, who inherited their mother's fire and kept everyone on their toes. The ranch continued to thrive under the combined efforts of multiple generations. Henry took over more of the daily management as Harrison aged, but the older man remained active, unable to fully retire. He and Theresa spent their days working side by side as always, slowing down only a little. One evening in early spring, when Harrison was 62 and Theresa 51, they sat on the porch they had added to the house years ago. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of purple and gold. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, three tow-headed whirlwinds of energy. "Can you believe we have been married 30 years?" Theresa asked, her hand in his. "Seems impossible. Feels like no time at all and also forever all at once. Do you remember when you proposed to me? In the wagon in the middle of Las Cruces?" Harrison laughed. "Not my finest moment. I think I said something like we should get married to stop people gossiping." "You did. And then you told me you loved me and made it all right." She squeezed his hand. "It has been a good 30 years, Harrison. Hard sometimes, but good. I would not change a single day. Neither would I." "Well, maybe some of the days when the cattle stampeded or the roof leaked or Lucy broke her arm falling off that damn horse. But overall, no, I would not change any of it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky darken and the stars emerge. The grandchildren had been called inside by their mothers, and the ranch was settling into evening quiet. "I have been thinking," Theresa said after a while, "about that night when you saved me from the wolves, about how scared I was, how certain I was going to die. And then you appeared like something out of a story and everything changed. I was just doing what anyone would do. No, you were not. Most men would have ridden on, not wanting the trouble of a half-dead woman, but you stopped. You cared. You brought me home and gave me everything I never dared hope for. You gave me just as much. I was dying in a different way, and you brought me back to life. We saved each other, remember?" "I remember." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I am so grateful for every day we have had together. You are my heart, Harrison, my home. You always have been." He kissed the top of her head, feeling the truth of her words settle into his soul. "And you are mine. Until the end of my days, you are mine and I am yours." As darkness fell completely and the first coyotes began their nightly chorus, they remained on the porch, holding hands and watching the stars wheel overhead. Inside the house, their family slept safe and warm. Around them, The ranch they had built together breathed and lived. It was not the life either of them had imagined when they were young. It was better, harder, more real than any dream. It was earned through work and love and the choice, made every single day to stand together against whatever came. And as Harrison sat there with Theresa beside him, he thought about that young man he had been, broken and convinced he was better off alone. He wished he could tell that man that there was hope, that love could heal even the deepest wounds, that taking a chance on another person was the bravest and best thing he would ever do. But that man was gone now, transformed by the years and the woman beside him into someone better, someone whole. And Harrison was grateful for every moment that had led him here, to this porch, to this life, to this love that had saved him as surely as he had once saved her from wolves in the darkness. More years passed, each one precious. They watched their grandchildren grow, welcomed new grandchildren into the world, and eventually began to slow down as age demanded its due. But they did so together, always together, facing each challenge as a team. When Harrison was 70, his body finally forced him to retire from active ranch work. It galled him to step back, but the arthritis in his hands and the weakness in his knees left him no choice. Henry ran the ranch now, with his own sons learning the trade, and Harrison had to content himself with advisory roles and spoiling great-grandchildren. "We built something that will last," Theresa reminded him on the days when frustration made him irritable. "Look around you. 3 generations working this land and more to come. That is your legacy, Harrison. That is what you created." "We created," he corrected. "None of this would exist without you." "Us," she agreed. "Always us." On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a party. The house was filled with people and noise and love, so much love it was almost overwhelming. Harrison stood in the middle of it all, Theresa beside him, and felt a contentment so complete it brought tears to his eyes. Henry stood to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "who taught us what real love looks like, who built this ranch with their own hands and filled it with family, who have shown us every day what it means to be committed, to work hard, to never give up on each other. We are all here because of you, and we love you more than words can say." Everyone raised their glasses, and Harrison had to look away to compose himself. When he looked back, he met Theresa's eyes and saw his own emotion reflected there. "Thank you," he managed to say. "All of you for being here, for being you. You are everything we ever hoped for and more." Later, after everyone had gone home and they were alone again, Theresa and Harrison sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. 40 years, Theresa said wonderingly. "How did we get so lucky?" "I do not think it was luck. I think it was choice. Every day we chose each other. Every day we chose love over fear, togetherness over solitude. That is not luck, that is work. Good work, though, the best work." "The very best," he agreed. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars. Finally, Theresa spoke again. "Harrison, if I go first, promise me you would not go back to how you were before. Do not shut yourself away. Let the family in. Let yourself still feel joy. Do not talk like that," he said roughly. "We have to talk about it sometime. We are not young anymore." She turned to look at him. "Promise me. I could not bear to think of you alone and isolated again after I am gone." "I promise," he said, though the words hurt. "But you have to promise me the same thing. Do not mourn so hard that you forget to live." "I promise." She took his hand. "But let us not worry about that now. We are still here, still together. Let us enjoy that for as long as we have. Deal." They sat together until the night grew cold and forced them inside, to the bed they had shared for 4 decades, still wrapped in each other's arms as they drifted off to sleep. Harrison made it to 76 before his heart gave out. It was quick at least, a massive heart attack while he was sitting on the porch watching the sun rise. He was there one moment and gone the next, slipping away as peacefully as anyone could hope. Theresa found him there, still sitting in his chair, his face peaceful. For a long moment she just stood there, unable to process what she was seeing. Then the reality crashed over her and she sank to her knees beside him, taking his hand. "Oh, my love," she whispered. "Oh, Harrison." The family gathered, mourning their patriarch. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch with a simple stone that read, "Harrison Ingram, beloved husband, father, grandfather. 1836–1912. He saved her, she saved him." Theresa stood at the grave long after everyone else had left, talking to him as if he could still hear. "You kept your promise," she said. "You loved me until the end of your days. You gave me everything, Harrison. Everything. I will miss you every moment of every day, but I will not let myself fade away. I promised you I would keep living, and I will. For you. For our family. But oh, it is going to be hard without you." True to her word, Theresa did not retreat into mourning. She remained active in the ranch operations, advising Henry and playing with her great-grandchildren. She told stories about Harrison, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations who had not known him well. But at night, alone in the bed that felt too big without him, she allowed herself to grieve. She missed him with an intensity that never faded, missed his presence and his voice and the particular way he had of looking at her that made her feel cherished. 5 years after Harrison died, Theresa had a stroke. It was not fatal, but it left her weak and unable to live alone. She moved in with Henry and Emma, occupying a bright room with a view of the ranch she and Harrison had built together. On quiet days, her great-grandchildren would come sit with her, and she would tell them stories. About Chicago and the factory and the journey west. About the night the wolves came and the rancher who saved her. About falling in love and building a life and the joy of choosing someone every single day. Was he really that wonderful? One great-granddaughter asked skeptically. He was human, Theresa said honestly. He had flaws and bad days and moments of weakness like anyone else. But he was also kind and brave and loyal. He saw me, really saw me when I felt invisible, and he loved me with everything he had. That made him wonderful, yes. Theresa made it to 88, a remarkable age for her time. In the end, she passed peacefully in her sleep, and the family buried her beside Harrison on the hill, under a stone that matched his. Theresa Ingram, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. 1851–1939. She saved him, he saved her. Their story became part of the family legend, told and retold across the generations. The ranch remained in Ingram hands, passed down through the years, a living testament to what two people could build when they chose love over fear. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun sets over the New Mexico desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, those who work the land swear they can feel something watching over them. A presence, warm and protective, like two souls who loved so deeply in life that not even death could separate them completely. The legacy of Harrison and Theresa Ingram lived on, not just in the land and the cattle and the horses, but in the love that filled the hearts of their descendants. In the way Henry taught his sons to treat their wives with respect and partnership. In the way Lucy raised her daughters to be strong and independent. In the countless small moments of choosing each other, supporting each other, saving each other in all the ways that matter. Because that was the real story, beyond the drama of wolves and rescues and danger. It was the story of two wounded souls who found each other in the wilderness and chose, every single day, to build something beautiful together. It was the story of love as a verb, An action, a choice made again and again until it became as natural as breathing. It was the story of a lonely rancher who saved a woman from wolves and discovered that she became the fierce protection his heart needed most. Not through violence or grand gestures, but through presence, partnership, and the quiet daily work of loving someone completely. And in the end, that was everything.